Hey guys, how's it going? We've been working behind the scenes here at Veracity Hill to find new and exciting ways to bring Dr. J's voice to a larger audience. And we've been spitballing new approaches within the last week or so here in the writer's room, and we're going to go pitch them to Kurt now and bring him in and see what he thinks of them. So let's go.
The anticipation's mounting.
Kurt, you ready for a meeting?
Sure.
Can you come in for a minute?
Sure. I'm smiling because I have no idea.
I mean, when are you not smiling?
What should I move this chair? No, I should just sit.
That chair's good.
By the way, I have no idea if we are live streaming or just recording because you guys have told me nothing about what's happening.
Oh, yeah.
The audience doesn't know what's happening. I don't know what's happening. So, we're in this together.
Yeah, so, as you know, Chris and I were meeting to strategize about kind of how we can best optimize you, right? You are our asset. You also have an expertise in an area that almost no one else has any knowledge on, which is really cool. Yeah. And on top of that, you're an extrovert and you have a teacher's heart and the ability to disentangle complex theology. So, as you know, we're trying to figure out ways to bring you and everything you bring to the table to more people. How do we get more people to your information and get them to the heart of what you can bring to the world in apologetics? And as Chris and I were talking about this, we started talking about books of the Bible and which books of the Bible naturally draw us in. And then Chris told me his favorite book of the Bible, and it blew my mind. And that kind of got us to where we are right now. So Chris, tell Kurt what your favorite book of the Bible is.
Well, actually, it is Song of Solomon.
Are you serious?
Yeah, right?
I mean, I had like a 1 out of 66 chance.
You had a 1 in 66 chance of guessing it right.
I mean, I was saying that as like a joke, you know?
Right. And Dante also thought it was a joke when I told him that.
Amazing.
That was my favorite book of the Bible.
So it is.
But it really because a lot of the modern translations will separate out the parts into like the beloved and the lover. So the him and her.
Yeah.
And so I found that as I was reading it, especially if I tried to play the parts and put myself in those positions and just read it out loud, when I got to the end of the book, I always felt like, wow, like I've just experienced something very sacred and special that normally is hidden. It's secret, but it's also a fundamental part of our humanity. And I've been led into that kind of sacred space, that vulnerable state that these two human beings are expressing for each other in the poem.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I loved it. It was just this beautiful piece of artwork and poetry that portrayed human intimacy in a very special way. And I think that's kind of, we leapt off of that, and Dante and I started imagining you just doing Song of Solomon streams. You just kind of in that same way, what would Veracity Hill look like if we also kind of invited people into that sacred space?
So to piggyback off of that, there's kind of two key words that we kind of gleaned from this. But now I have to, for my own curiosity, have to ask the question, because now I don't know what the answer could possibly be. What is your favorite book of the Bible?
You know, when I was in high school, I read the book of Proverbs. I felt like it equipped me to live the good life. Not that it guarantees the good life, but if you follow the wisdom of people who have come before us, right? I mean, that's like something that a lot of folks in our generation and even the younger generation just put off, like, screw tradition, you know, we're going to do it my way, you know, and it's like, that is such a prideful and arrogant approach. We need to learn from the people that have come before us, so that way we don't screw up like they screwed up. So, like, I like Proverbs a lot because it's very practical. Even though I'm a theologian and I like thinking about theology and sort of, like, the intellectual side of things, Proverbs, like, hey, here's how you live life.
That's super fascinating. And again, not what I would have guessed for you either. Kurt. But Chris's story about why Song of Solomon jumps off the page for him kind of spoke a few things, I think, into the room. One of those is the question of how can we make apologetics not feel static? Like it's just this law that never moves and we like encounter it and it's just the same. Because life doesn't feel static. Life feels like it's moving in lots of directions. And even the same question asked different ways has a different emotional pull on us. So that kind of brought through the through line of how can we make apologetics feel like a story? Or another way to put that is how can we help the audience like feel invested in the journey of how we're all trying to work out our faith with fear and trembling. We started talking, all right, like what are good examples of this journey movement? I'm just the person that listens to Chris and then verbally diarrheas out. Nope, that wouldn't be through the mouth. What's the
Vomiting.
Vomit, not diarrhea. Verbally vomits out all the tidbits that Chris says. Chris, you were talking about this conversation between a Catholic and maybe a Catholic and an atheist that really jumped out to you. So I'll let you explain that too, and like how that brought you to the table.
Right. So we kind of bounced off that idea of we don't want apologetics to feel static, and I know you and Dante have been talking about the hero's journey.
Yeah.
So we latched onto the idea of journey a little bit more, and it brought up Cameron Bertuzzi, his investigation into Catholicism over the last year.
Yeah.
Which has led him to go on a journey to investigate some of the deeper things of the faith. And because of that heart posture, he would bring on different speakers that normally he wouldn't have interacted with to get their take and genuinely ask them, what's going on with this part of your faith? And he had several very healthy conversations with Trent Horn, who is a Catholic apologist.
Yeah.
But one of them really struck me because he had scheduled several interviews that day because he's on this journey. They couldn't have been any different. Like he had Trent Horn sitting across the chair with him and then like waiting in the wings in the same room. I don't remember his name, but it was some naturalist. And so like every now and then Trent Horn would say something about Christianity that challenged maybe even like a Protestant view of Christianity or even the traditional view of what is mere Christianity. And like the naturalist would get very excited and light up and they'd start like dialoguing, even though he's not even on camera.
That's essentially what the philosopher Paul Draper argues as to why one ought to prefer naturalism to theism. It's intrinsically more probable because it is more modest in what it proposes. So it only proposes the physical world. Theism proposes the physical and the mental.
Ben has perked up. He's like
looking over. He's like, well,
he's like
thought about that.
Looking so fondly.
And so someone
Trent.
could say, well, Protestantism proposes the written word of God, and Catholicism has the written and unwritten word.
And so it created this organic moment because there was something of a structure. Cameron wanted to talk to Trent, but also he was going on this journey and just letting the conversation flow where it needed to flow. Even if it meant that the person off camera who never got seen but could be heard was chatting with the guest. And I thought like that's a very organic interaction that led to some of that because of Cameron's journey and some of his vulnerability allowed us to kind of see this connection between all three of them as they were chatting.
Another example of that kind of similar vein is Justin Brierley's podcast, Unbelievable, and how, yes, he has debates, but they're not so much the formalized debate. They feel more interactive, and they feel like it's not a will of pedanticism that maybe one of the two people debating might be moved an inch.
Sean kind of came back and said, this isn't the kind of thing it strikes me people would invent. The kind of demands that Christianity makes on people are not necessarily easy ones, and so on. What were your thoughts on some of that?
Yeah, I think I should clarify that when I described the thought that potentially Christianity was sort of invented as a tool, I didn't mean it as an oppressive tool, although I agree with you, Sean. There's been times where it's been that. I more meant that it seems plausible to me that at times Christianity has been something that's been able to adhere people groups together in a positive way. And I actually agree with you about the teachings of Jesus. I think they are revolutionary.
It's that tension, that hopefulness even, that I think draws you in a little bit of, maybe this is actually going to move the needle a little bit. Kind of what keeps coming to mind is, how can we show the real world the boots on the ground relevance of disentangling complex theology? And that's going to be muddy a little bit. And I think at the end of the day, we need to see that reflected in your life. Because if apologetics doesn't change your life and speak into it, then why are we telling other people, like, hey, use apologetics, disentangle your theology? So the two keywords that rose up are authority and vulnerability. So I think we've done a great job so far of showcasing Dr. J's authority, right? We did the Ehrman series. I think you knocked it out of the park by having a very balanced approach and looking on it, not with, Christian tinted lenses even, but with an objective lens, because Jesus says the truth will set you free. I feel like you ran with that. You showed your authority in giving Ehrman essentially a fair trial. What I don't think we've done yet is show your vulnerability, because every journey has vulnerability in it. With those two keywords in mind, I've asked Chris to bust out the whiteboard.
So, I just drew this now.
Okay.
And it shows up on screen. Isn't that great? Okay. Dante and I came up with this kind of graph showing two poles, essentially, between vulnerability and authority. And we thought, hey, here are places where, like, you can have increases in authority and increases in vulnerability. So it's like you start out pretty vulnerable over here. You're the most vulnerable. And as you make certain content, you're less vulnerable. And vice versa with authority. So, like, let's say a certain segment or show is here, it would be demonstrating Dr. J's vulnerability as a human more than his authority. Different types of shows could go here. And Dante and I spitballed a few different types of things that could go there. But we're just curious to see how you would fill in the blank in this model, where we have a set of shows that demonstrate inversely, like, okay, this show demonstrates a little bit of both, vulnerability and authority. But this show over here that airs next week, it's going to be all vulnerability. And this one's going to be all authority. So we thought if we use that as kind of our boundaries and put different segments or portions of Veracity Hill there, you would get a lot of variety within the same person, Dr. J.
Yeah.
The specific question for you then is, we've talked off air about lots of ideas for specific segments or series. So can you plug those in to those 4 quadrants or 4 areas?
So, like, the one idea is like a blind interview, right? This was brought up just earlier this week, actually. So here's me being vulnerable a little bit. When I did the podcast, right, one of my weaknesses was that I didn't give enough prep time. And so for a good chunk of the shows, I was winging it. Chris can confirm this. But, I still pulled it off. But the blind interview, what makes this idea interesting is I don't know who the guest is. I don't even know that they've written a book. I don't know anything about them. And so I am just sort of lost in the digital world, right? I don't even know what they look like because I wouldn't be able to see their face. And so then I would have to interview them and ask them these questions about who they are, what they do. So that, I take it, would almost be on the like absolute vulnerable section, because I would be flying blind. Similar to this conversation.
So what for you, Kurt, would be like full authority, or an example that of things that you would like to do in the coming weeks and months that would fit in that full authority quadrant 4 area?
That would be like a series on the Gallic monks, or I have a series that I've already started recording on abortion. It's a hot topic. There are issues that many Christians are thinking about at the forefront of their minds, social issues, and they're looking for some guidance. They're looking for how to have conversations with their neighbor or a family member about their theological and political differences. And we need to have healthy conversations with people. One of the things that folks said when I was a kid was, the two things you don't talk about at the dinner table are politics and religion. And like, those are the two most important things in life. Why wouldn't we know how to talk about these things, right? So the fact that people didn't learn how to talk about those things, I think, is leading in part to the increasing isolation of our society between like political views. So we don't know how to have those conversations with people that we don't agree with, and that's a big problem. So the abortion series is going to be a number of videos that sort of take a step back from the partisan rhetoric and looks at the issues, provides broader context to the issues, political history. And so pre-record, that's like higher authority, whereas like live stream stuff, that tends to be more vulnerable because you don't know exactly what you're going to say, and there's no do-overs, and the internet is forever. So like, if we're putting in something in quadrant 2, I would say like, if I were doing reaction videos, unscripted reaction videos. So if we had like a tweet or a TikTok video I was watching while we're live streaming, and truly it's the first time I've seen it, right? So it's not like I've watched it, like some of these react videos, these guys watch it and then they're going to prepare what they're going to say, But like a live stream react video would be in that next, in that 2 quadrant. The 3 quadrant could be like, could be me as a guest being interviewed by other people, because that would be, unscripted. That gives 1 item in each of the 4 quadrants.
So as we've been talking about here, we kind of looked at your skill set and looked at who we are as Veracity Hill and started saying like, hey, we don't want to do a straight series 10 weeks in a row on one subject right now. We want to be a little more nimble, a little more adaptable. And the more Chris and I talked, the more we thought like, okay, that adaptability or nimbleness also allows us to kind of flesh out this vulnerability towards authority and authority towards vulnerability tension. And we can kind of play towards that week in, week out. So that's what we were kind of talking through. Maybe off air, we can even talk more specifics about what that can look like. But just in general, how does this make you feel and what do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. Other than that, I was kind of in the dark about what this was going to be about, which is sort of fun.
How does that make you feel?
It makes someone feel vulnerable, right?
Do I sense a little anxiousness?
Probably. I mean, not that I'm nervous in situations like this, but yeah, it's just you don't know what you're going into. I don't know what types of questions you guys are going to ask, and so this is sort of enjoyable. I like having to think on my toes, and of course, for us to strategize about Veracity Hill content, fits doubly with the conversations we've been having over the last couple months.
Chris, I would like you to make an editor's note. He said, sort of enjoyable. Sort of. Chris, do you have anything else you want to ask or add before we shut this out?
I don't think so. I think this gives a good picture of like what we were hoping to accomplish, which was to create, which is what we've been talking about off camera.
Yeah.
Is hoping to create a framework that you then fill, which in 3 minutes is exactly what you did with this whiteboard.
Yeah.
Where we were like, hey, let's try this framework out. How would that fit like a suit? And you tried it on and you customized it to you.
Yeah.
And we're hoping that that gives a framework and direction and vision for content going forward and how we can better utilize all the strengths that are here in the office.
Cool. Nice job, guys. I like it.